It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Jay Staples. Jay Staples is the proud owner of A Sober Caddy, a unique creative agency that works directly with individuals and companies to uncover their authentic purpose and develop it into a brand. He believes that everyone has a purpose, a unique gift or a talent that they can tap into to create value and make a difference. His sincere desire is to help his clients discover this purpose and then use it to shape a brand that is not just recognizable, but also resonates deeply with their target audience. Advertising and marketing run through Jay's veins, as natural to him as breathing. Yet, it's not just about creating eye-catching logos or crafting compelling taglines. Staples' approach to branding is deeply rooted in authenticity. To him, a brand isn't merely a business or a personal identity. It's an embodiment of purpose, a reflection of core values, and a statement of vision. So, par for course, to pepper in a little bit of my own authentic self during Jay's interview, I show up with some perfectly timed golf puns. Why? Because I think it's important to infuse humor in our daily lives. That's a part of my value. It's also a part of my brand. So even if you're not a golf fan, I hope you enjoy. Here's Jay on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Hi, Jay. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really glad you're here.
Well, honored to be here.
It felt like it took moving tech mountains to finally make this happen.
Well, I am no tech wizard. I've proven that over and over again. So honored to finally be here. It feels like we've moved mountains. So
We have. Well, I'm glad it's working out. Let's just jump right in. Why don't you tell the audience, because I don't know your I feel like I've heard bits and pieces of your story, like over the year and some change that I've known you. So if you're okay, just filling in a little bit of the backstory for the people that are listening, where did you grow up? And then what was the messaging that you were kind of receiving around what you're supposed to be doing after high school?
Oh, wow. Well, I grew up in Wisconsin. I probably said Wisconsin like was a Wisconsinite. So the messaging, I love you with all my heart because I love that question because it just makes me sweat. So the messaging, I just love my family and I'm just coming off being with my family and my first instinct is to just a jigsaw puzzle because I think the messaging is my parents had the healthiest of intentions of messaging, trying to give us the message that you are allowed to do whatever you're allowed to do and you can be whatever you want to be. But I think that through that, they pushed us in so many different directions and gave us too loose of way. And so I was the youngest of three and, grew up with really, my dad was, by the time I kind of came around, my dad had really became somewhat successful, probably upper middle class within his advertising agency. And so, my two older brothers had probably became middle school. And then I was kind of in kindergarten when, we started getting, a lot more money. And so I kind of fell in that spoiled, brat, spoiled kid, third, child. So I probably had everything I never wanted, needed, cried for. And then I had two older brothers that, picked on me, but I also made sure that I was always protected. So, I had that. And so I had two older brothers that, were the coolest people on the planet in my world. So I knew that I had protection and I also knew that I was spoiled. So I grew up playing golf and knew I wanted to be kind of a professional golfer. And so, my life was built around, playing golf. And so we had country clubs and we had a lake house and a country club up there. And so in a sense that, golf was my life. And so by the time I got, out of high school, I was playing in golf tournaments nonstop and, kind of put social life on hold. I was playing a lot more golf tournaments through the summer and trying to get into college golf and, playing a lot more, sometimes state and national tournaments. And so when, a lot of people are going to kind of pool parties and hanging out during the summer and school and stuff, I was kind of playing in golf tournaments. So looking back on it, I think my self-worth was probably tied to, how well I was swinging the golf club. And when people were probably calling girls and I was looking at, VHS tapes of my golf swing. So there was probably a little switch of, I was not calling the girls and probably awkward around girls and probably taking a look at how my wrist was coming through the ball. And so there was, when I came to college, when I got to college, there was, playing, I wanted to be professional golf or was going to be a head professional at a golf course. So there was golf related in my future. That was all I wanted to do. So, and my parents were 1,000% behind that. And so I never had a job and I never, I was always allowed to follow my dreams and, my brothers and were always there to protect. And so I was running a fool and getting in a lot of trouble at 17 and 18. I started getting into a lot more trouble and I wasn't really showing signs of drug and alcohol addiction. I was kind of being that straight arrow, was staying away from drugs and alcohol for the most part. But if addiction was zeroing in on a guy ready to take over, they had me on their target list because I was ready or ripe for someone primed for someone that was dying to get outside of self, if that makes sense.
Wow, there's a lot to take in there. I feel like I could go in several different directions just
that
thinking
felt like
about
a lot.
It was a lot.
I felt like I didn't even answer your question there, but
I think you did. You also just peppered in this, like, what I heard was you got the messaging from your parents. We'll support you. Do whatever you want, right? And you're also the youngest child, so you had access to more than maybe your older siblings had because your parents were more successful and you were hyper focused on golf. But you also peppered in this idea of like, when I went to college. So did you golf in college? Did you go to college? Like, if you're okay, kind of just fill us in actually the next chapter, because you kind of, I'm going to say this because you teed it up, pun intended, really, really nicely to talk about how do we go from being this like hyper-focused on on your golf game, totally like not focusing on what is a quote unquote normal social thing to be doing as an 18, 19-year-old young man, which is like exploring, being in relationship and going out and doing all those things. But you alluded to things are about to get pretty rough. Also pun intended. So I've got all the golf puns. I grew up on a golf course, so I feel like I'm just going to like pull these out of my sleeve.
I just have to say, like, that was spectacular. Like, I don't know if anyone could have done better. There was a lot more than I could even have added, and I'm pretty funny in my opinion. But no, there was. So I left Wisconsin, went down south, and I actually majored in professional golf management and played golf, and quickly fell in love with. I thought I loved golf, and quickly fell in love with drugs and alcohol. So. My very first night, like I can probably remember maybe 11 nights or days in my life that are stick if I close my eyes. And one of the 11 days is watching my dad pull out on this green Oldsmobile Aurora that my dad, who's probably like my best friend, and my dad has played many, many roles in my life. Dad has been one, and through my life is, I can honestly say right now he's dad number one, which has been a huge lift because he's been my boss. He's been a lot of different things, enabler, a number of different things. And dad always was down the list, but, he drove me down to college, and I remember him driving off, and I remember having this sinking feeling like, whoa, because I never felt more alone. And I always felt safe. And then I just remember I lost everything. And so I just felt like the most unsure of my life. And I had everything I wanted. Like every dream that I had, like my dream was like I could reach it. And then I watched them like dissolve into the Mississippi sunset. And the very next thing I did was I heard hooting and hollering down the hall, and I opened my dorm room door, walked down, a bunch of guys playing a drinking game, and that was my very first night where I got blackout drunk and showed up to the golf course the very next day, and that was the very first day that I really ever played golf hungover. And there was a time when I started getting trouble, and grades in golf were suffering, and there was a conversation that was saying, like, you either need to stop drinking, or you need to there was a priority, like, get your priorities straight, like, golf grades or drinking or something. And then I remember having this conversation saying, like, I got a brilliant idea. You just need to learn how to drink and do drugs and play golf at the same time. And I can tell you, like, I remember going down to the driving range with a bunch of pharmaceutical drugs and stuff, and a bunch of beer, and drinking and doing stuff on the driving range and hitting golf balls, trying to learn how to play golf intoxicated, hitting golf balls, because that was my solution to, because I wasn't going to give up drugs and alcohol. I was just going to learn how to play. And so, I can tell you, like, it didn't end up well. And so I got kicked out, flunked out. People told me, you are no longer allowed to play golf. You need to go get help. You're no longer allowed to be at this college, in fact. So I flunked out, bombed out. And, going back to the original question, mom and dad were there and never really asked questions, never really had consequences, came back with pretty much pillows saying, like, hey, that's all right, Jay, like, figure out what you want to do from here. Like, there was really no consequences. And I'm not saying, mom and dad they thought that they were doing everything, right. So looking back, like, people probably would say, like, mom and dad, you should have, like, did whatever, but their solution was to surround Jay with pillows and make sure his landing was as soft as possible. There was some arrest, and there was obviously Jay was not going in the right direction. There was every sign in the world. So, but my mom especially probably takes it the hardest. She probably still thinks that she wasn't the best mom, but like I tell any mom and dad right now suffering, there's no instruction manual, but they did what they thought was right. But they loved me, and so drugs and alcohol, everything you're talking about, a guy that had literally was face to face with his dream, and drugs and alcohol came in, and I fell in love with it.
Whew. It's a hard story to take in, honestly, because like you said, you were literally this close to, like, living this dream that you'd been working really hard towards, and all of a sudden you replace the addiction of golf, right? And how focused you were on being a professional golfer with substances. And then everybody knows that's age-old story of, like, once you're diving in off the deep end, it's game over. Can we say swing and a miss? Can I say that? college, going to college and trying to learn to use substances and golf effectively, quote unquote, that's a real swing and a miss. And honestly, as you were talking about it, all I could think about is, that just sounds so dangerous. Maybe that's why I don't play golf. Like, people are on the golf course just, like, wild.
It's taken me a really, really long time. And honestly, like, I've said it numerous times, and I've said it in front of high schools, and I've, and colleges, and I've talked and worked with athletes, and I can honestly look and say, I've literally can touch my dream, and everyone's like, oh my God, what does it feel like you missed out on your dream? And I'm so glad it ended that way. Like I honestly would have been miserable. Like if I would have gotten to the other side of that dream, I'm so glad that it ended the way that it did, because I would not be sitting in this chair. Like I'm to this point, like I want my life today. I do not want that life that if I would have gotten to the other side, that if I would have found a way to live the miserable life, like, we're a couple of days away from a PGA player that right here in Fort Worth, Texas, that, withdrew from a PGA professional event and then, committed suicide that night. And, right here in Fort Worth, Texas. And, that is a professional player that, was struggling for 2 years and was playing in a PGA event and withdrew and thought there was no way out other than committing suicide. And that would have been me. Like when I heard that, when I woke up this, on Saturday morning and heard the news and saw the, I honestly, and I went to an AA meeting the very, that morning when I went to my men's meeting and had an accountability group, which just so happened to be like, that's how it, I sat in my men's accountability group and I said, like, I meant like that was, so go I, like, that would have been me. Like you guys would have been hearing about me, because that's where I would have ended up, because I would have been a miserable person thinking that there was no way out. And you guys gave me a way out. Like I did not think that there was a way out at one point, and there was, everything had to turn out the way that it did. So.
Okay. You kind of alluded to like, you wouldn't change anything, right? Because it would, the path, like that journey, you wouldn't be where you are had you not had those experiences, some of them including, and you're kind of like peppering in some dropped bombs of like, yeah, that jail experience or multiple jail experiences. We're going to save that because honestly, I think it's like, that is almost like a carrot that you are dangling for somebody to reach out to you and ask more. Like, can you tell me more of your story? And I think that that's great. Let's leave that carrot dangling. So if anybody is interested in diving into the more like nitty gritty of Jay's journey, we'll make sure that we have your contact information in the show notes so that they can actually reach out to you. But here's the question. What exactly are you doing now that you love so much, right? Because you wouldn't be where you were had you not had the journey. So tell us what you're doing.
Well, I'm yearning for authenticity. And so whatever that means, and that's working a lot with athletes and creatives, a lot with advertising people and executives more often than not. So the simple answer is a lot more coaching and kind of what I call creative branding. And so what I really want the people to do is really kind of find their authentic self and their authentic purpose. And so I'm working a lot with companies, individuals, communities, finding their authentic purpose, and a lot with individuals and companies, just really kind of tapping into authenticity. And what I've really, really enthralled with, society and everyone wanting, to be something else or do something else. So I got an advertising background, and I've, for a while there, just kind of the advertising, you put a product and you try to get the public to buy your product. And so I've had this thought, like, why can't we get people to buy into who they're authentically meant to be? And so that's my biggest kick right now, is let's trick ourselves into buying into who we're authentically meant to be.
I don't think we have to trick ourselves. I love that that's kind of the brand in itself that you're also drawing out of other people, because being authentic is so important, especially nowadays. So I'm just going to ask you this question.
I have a feeling it's going to be a good question, because you are filled with good questions.
I try. Knowing what you do you see yourself as successful?
Oh my God. My definition of success has changed so much. Yeah, I do. And, it's just recently that I can look you in the eye and kind of look the world in the eye and say, like, I am successful. And because I would say within the last 6 months, I can honestly say that I'm successful, because I've been, for 47 years, I'm 47 almost and a half years old. And for 47 years, I've been chasing this delusional success and happiness. And, when you finally told me, you didn't have to tell me, but like finally someone told me, the world told me, like, we can find our own, authentic definition of success and happiness and all these other things. Like, when I defined success and bought into it, like, finally I can say I'm success.
I love it. If you could give, well, two things quickly. I just appreciate that you said I'm 47 and a half, because I got a lot of flack recently, like basically rounding up my age. And somebody was like, dude, that stops when you're like 12. And I was like, I'm sorry, I never got that memo. I'm just like always, you're either closer to your age or your age and a half. So anyways, that was like super cute to see that. Last question, because I feel like we are leaving a lot out, but I want to kind of end the podcast on you giving advice. If you could give advice to your younger self, or really like thinking about some of those younger athletes that you work with that might have similar experiences, or kind of dipping their toe into similar experiences that you had, other than what you've already kind of shared or alluded to, is there any other type of advice you would give your younger self?
Well, I love the 4 agreements. I live my life on the 4 agreements. If you don't know the book, pick it up. I live it. But I think the 2 mantras that I have in my bathroom is get 1% better today and perfect the art of showing up, because there's so many times where I've just chosen to walk away. But if we just show up, like, so much, like if I just show up, so much has happened. If, instead of just walking away, just show up, and you don't even have to do anything, just show up. So much has changed in my life just by walking through that door.
Well, I know somebody's listening to this and that's going to resonate with them, or maybe it's something that they haven't heard before and they really needed to hear it. And I will just say thank you for authentically showing up in this interview. Like I said at the start, like, we had hella tech issues initially, so we had to reschedule and it was a whole thing. But Jay, I'm so grateful that you were able to carve out a little bit of time to sit down with me. Let me ask some serious questions and then drop some like just goofy golf puns. So thanks again for being a guest on the podcast.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.